which quarterbacks and tight ends should be in your lineup, and who should be on the bench for Week 7. Stick around and we'll let you know. Welcome back, Endgame community. I'm Pierre, he's Chris. We're here to help you out, as always, with your lineup decisions for quarterback and tight end, this time heading into Week 7. Don't forget, there are some big offensive teams on bye this week, talking about the Los Angeles Rams, the Buffalo Bills, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Philadelphia Eagles. Let's talk about those guys, though, first, that you don't have to worry about, the must-starts at both positions. At quarterback, Pat Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert. At tight end, Travis Kelce, and Mark Andrews. All right, let's get it going with the Thursday night game, starting with the Saints and the Cardinals. Now, for New Orleans, it looks like another week of Andy Dalton. Had a back issue, but he gets another chance. What does that mean in fantasy? Is this a matchup that he could exploit?
I mean, maybe, but just no real upside with Andy Dalton. They don't throw it as much with Andy Dalton, so in deep 2 QB Superflex only, but no, not starting Andy Dalton.
Yeah, it's got to be a deep league option. I mean, Olave should be back, but the thing is, still missing receivers there. I know Arizona's defense isn't great, but Dalton is just kind of is what he is, kind of a game manager at this point. So only in a deep Superflex league. And we have to talk about the quarterback / tight end / whatever he is, Taysom Hill. Of course, you went crazy and put him in your lineup last week, and what did he do? Nothing. What does he do this week, Chris? Make your prediction.
Probably nothing, but there's always a chance he does something. So, when we talk about like some of these other tight ends, we're going to talk about some of these desperation kind of tight ends. I think he's the best of that bunch, but he's just basically a desperation streaming option.
And that's what he will always be, at least in this role. Guys, try to tell you, don't get carried away by that 4-touchdown outburst. Sure, he could score and do something, but you will never know when it happens. So he's a desperation streamer as usual. Now, Arizona, you got Kyler Murray. I mean, just not has looked good as a passer lately, especially last week in what should have been a really good spot for him in Seattle. But he runs the ball. I mean, I guess that's keeping his fantasy value afloat. What do you make of him this week?
Yeah, I mean, one thing about the Saints is they're going to be without Lattimore again. They're banged up on defense, but I mean, it doesn't get better than the Seahawks, really. So I think you got to start Kyler Murray, but just got to take whatever he gives you and roll with it. So don't love it, but you got to start him.
I mean, only because there really aren't better options probably on waivers, unless you can get Tua or somebody like that. But I'd say you can reluctantly start him and just take what he gives you, but that's what you're going to get this year. Zach Ertz, just when people were going to start worrying about him because of Hopkins coming back, now Marquise Brown is out. So does that make Ertz kind of the same as he's been, a solid, decent tight end one?
Yep, I think, it's like one target hog leaves, the other one comes in, but it stays the same basically for Zach Ertz. So I think if you got him, you start him.
Yep, I mean, he's getting targets. I don't think that changes. He's a solid, if not exciting, starter at tight end. All right, when the Browns take on the Ravens, you're rolling with the quarterback and tight end duo at Baltimore. And you're probably not going with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. Am I right?
No, not starting Jacoby Brissett.
David Njoku, on the other hand, I mean, he's been pretty solid. Is he almost a must-start?
Yeah, I mean, when we look at the tight end landscape, if you got David Njoku, you're probably feeling pretty good. I think you've got to have him in your lineup pretty much every week.
And this is a good matchup against Baltimore. Yeah, you should feel really good about Njoku. Start him this week. Tampa Bay going to take on Carolina. What is going on with Tom Brady? I mean, we kind of know what's going on with Tom Brady, but talking about football here, he is not taking advantage of some really good matchups. Does he do it against Carolina?
I mean, he couldn't do it against Steelers. I'm not banking on it against Carolina. Just a guy I only want to start in 2 QB Superflex leagues.
Yeah, I don't see how you can feel much better. It's not injuries at receiver. It's not anything else. And I'm remembering why I was kind of calling Brady a bust before the season during draft season. And I really didn't draft much of him. I don't feel great. I mean, you can start him, but he's not a must start anymore. Now, what about tight end? This is interesting. Cameron Brate, unfortunately, you saw was stretchered off the field in week 6. Cade Otton was good in his place a week earlier. Does Cade Otton interest you in fantasy this week?
Yeah, I think he's a decent streaming option. I mean, we saw, like you said, 2 weeks ago when Bray was out, he got a steady amount of targets. I think he's one of those guys that if you're desperate at tight end and you need a streamer, he'll get the job done.
Definitely a sneaky streamer and maybe a guy because we got to assume Bray won't be back real soon. Maybe a good guy to pick up and kind of keep in your pocket there for the long term if you need a tight end. And then at Carolina, they will have somebody at quarterback. So whoever they have at quarterback, do you start him?
No. Whoever it is, I'm benching him.
That's probably a good move. Atlanta Falcons going to take on the Cincinnati Bengals. Surprising to see that these teams don't really have different records. But let's talk about the fact that Marcus Mariota, well, he's always capable of running in a touchdown like he did last week. Does he have success against Cincinnati?
I can't trust him. I mean, in a 2 QB super flex league, sure, because he does have that rushing upside, but in like a 1 QB league, I can't start him.
Yep, he's always going to be that guy who won't put up big passing numbers, but could always sneak in a touchdown on the ground. So super flex, okay. Single quarterback, no way. And then there's Kyle Pitts, sort of redemption. He scored, but how good can you really feel about Kyle Pitts?
I mean, you can't feel that good. He scored, but didn't really do a whole lot outside of that. But I still think if you have Kyle Pitts, you kind of have to start him.
You kind of do because you probably don't have a better option. So, yeah, if you have Kyle Pitts, start Kyle Pitts. If you have Joe Burrow, do you have to start Joe Burrow?
Yeah, I think you have to start Joe Burrow. Plus, it's the Falcons. It's a great matchup. You got to start Joe Burrow.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, this matchup, he has been getting better. Look, Chase finally has been resurrected. So, yes, good spot. Definitely start Joe Burrow. And then Hayden Hurst could have some success against this Atlanta defense.
Yeah, Atlanta, one of the only team, actually, who's allowing more fantasy points to tight ends than the tight ends' average fantasy points, if that makes any sense. I probably said that terribly. But what I'm trying to say is I think Hayden Hurst is a very good streaming option this week.
I think it's a very good streaming option. You can't forget the revenge narrative here with Hayden Hurst. But look, they're giving up a lot of yardage. It's not even because of fluky touchdowns. They've only given up a touchdown to tight ends. They could definitely give up some yardage and maybe a touchdown to Hurst. I like Hurst a lot this week. Detroit Lions coming off a bye to face the Dallas Cowboys in the Jerry Dome. All right, so Jared Goff, what do you think he'll do against this Dallas defense?
Maybe throw for 200-ish yards, a couple interceptions, maybe a touchdown. Not starting Jared Goff.
All right, so basically he'll do Jared Goff things. Yeah, and against this defense on the road, no thank you. TJ Hawkinson, could he do something?
I mean, he could, but look, he's been terrible. Other than that one crazy game where he went off, he's been terrible. But again, like, he's probably better than anybody on your waiver wire. Well, maybe. There might be a couple guys we talk about later that I'd prefer over him, but I think if you have Hawkinson, you almost kind of have to start him.
Yeah, because of tight end the way it is, I don't expect great things, but he's at least a decent start at tight end. And then what about Dak Prescott? Look, we don't know, but I think it's safe to say if he's healthy, he's playing, considering Cooper Rush just got picked off 3 times in a primetime game in a loss to Philly. So if Dak is back, is he an auto start?
Has to be. Against the Lions, I mean, you've held Dak since week 1. If you don't roll him out this week, I don't know what you're doing. You got to start him.
Definitely a must start. I mean, he should be good by now. You got to put him in your lineup. Dalton Schultz, I don't know. I mean, let's assume he even plays. He pulled himself, I guess, pregame warmups. He didn't even have an injury designation, and then he didn't play at all. I mean, can you even trust him?
No, I like, you want to put him on your bench and see what he does, that's fine, but I can't trust him in my lineup. If he looks good, great. You can use him the rest of the season, but this week I got to bench him.
Yeah, I mean, right now he's nothing more than a stash. I would stash him if you have the room, but you can't start him until you see him do something. The Giants are going to take on the Jaguars. What about Daniel Jones? I mean, the Giants are winning, but not because he's putting up big numbers or anything. Is Daniel Jones interesting in fantasy?
No, he's like the MVS version of quarterbacks for me. I'm never going to start him.
That's a good comp. Look, the best thing Daniel Jones has done so far this year is not turn the ball over a ton, and that's because they're not letting him do too much with it. You can't start him in fantasy. Now, Daniel Bellinger, led the team in receiving last week, caught another touchdown. I think he's at least streamable.
Yeah, I think, in deep leagues, if you're looking for a streamer, he's streamable.
All right, and then let's talk about Trevor Lawrence. All of a sudden is running the ball in the end zone like a madman. What do you think he does against the G-men?
I'm not expecting a lot. Giants play slow, keep the score low. Defense is good. 2 QB super flex only.
Yep, I agree. I mean, just because of the bye weeks and stuff. I mean, in a super flex, you can start him, but I don't feel good about him at all. And Evan Engram, I guess he's on the radar.
I guess he's never on my radar, but there's probably worse options than Evan Engram.
That's not quite a ringing endorsement, but yeah, you could do worse. At least he'll get a few targets, but I don't want to start him if I don't have to. Indianapolis going to Tennessee, and now we have to talk about Matt Ryan, fantasy savior from last week, when probably nobody started him. I mean, do you think he keeps it going against a pretty vulnerable Tennessee defense?
I do. One of my favorite streaming options in 1 QB leagues this week is Matt Ryan. Tennessee gives up a ton to quarterbacks. I like Matt Ryan this week.
Yeah, look, last week wasn't a fluke. He had thrown over 300 yards a couple times before this season. I think he keeps it going. I really like Matt Ryan. I liked him last week. Didn't expect him to do what he did, but I really like him this week. And what about Ryan Tannehill? I don't know if I'll ever really like him.
Yeah, they just don't throw enough, and I doubt the Colts are going to force him to throw more. So 2 QB super flex only.
Packers take on the Commanders. We're going to have Aaron Rodgers in command for Green Bay. What do you think he does against this defense?
I mean, if there's ever a week to feel good about Aaron Rodgers, this is it against the Commanders. So I'm going to say a good start this week.
Yeah, I think he's more of a high-end QB2. If you're streaming him because he's been dropped, this might be a good time to take a chance on him because of the matchup. So I do kind of like Aaron Rodgers this week. What about Robert Tonyan? All of a sudden emerged with, 10 catches, 90 yards? And I think a lot of that was because Randall Cobb was out. He will be out again this week. Is this a place that you start Tonyan?
Yeah, against Washington, I think you can feel good about Robert Tonyan. If you need a tight end this week, one of my favorite streaming options.
I think he's a solid streaming option. Obviously got more involved. The one thing I worry, though, if you look at Washington's defense, they've given up a lot more points to wide receivers than tight ends. But that said, I think he's still somebody you can go with if you need help. And then for Washington, it looks like Taylor Heineke is back behind center because Carson Wentz is out. Any hope for Taylor Heineke?
I mean, on the plus side, he does use his legs, he does run, but this is a tough Green Bay secondary. I'm not starting Taylor Heineke.
No, I mean, guys, you can do better. He had some moments last year, but most of them were not good. So don't start Taylor Heineke. Jets at the Broncos, young versus experienced at quarterback. Let's talk about Zach Wilson, the first of the Wilsons. On the road against Denver, is this a place to trust Zach Wilson?
Definitely not. Definitely not a place to trust Zach Wilson. I am sitting Zach Wilson.
I had the feeling you'd say that. I agree. You don't want any part of Zach Wilson in this matchup. And then the other Wilson is Russ at home against the Jets. Does that interest you?
I mean, I think he's fine this week. Not one of my favorite, options as far as 1 QB goes, but given the buys and everything, I think he's fine.
Yeah, you can't get too excited about Russ. I mean, I much prefer a guy like Matt Ryan, over him, but I guess if Russ is all you got, then you go with him. Texans at Raiders. Davis Mills is still the guy there. Can he do something against this Raider defense?
I mean, he should. It's not a tough defense, but he's played not tough defenses before and not done much. So I think he's streamable, but only in like a 2 QB Superflex league.
Yeah, he just has not put up numbers this year. And, only if you have to. Don't love Davis Mills, but in a 2 QB or Superflex, he's playable. Derek Carr, can he finally get it going, or at least get them to a win against these Texans?
I mean, he should. It's the Texans. It's a great matchup. I think Derek Carr, another one of my favorite streaming options this week, so I like Derek Carr.
Yeah, I think they'll bounce back. Had a week off to kind of figure things out. He should put up numbers. You got to trust Derek Carr this week. What about Darren Waller? Has been kind of disappointing this year.
Yeah, but again, one of these guys that, based on the tight end landscape, if you've got him, you pretty much have to play him.
Yeah, I agree. The matchup is good enough. If you got Darren Waller, you put him out there. Seahawks at Chargers. I know you saw it coming. You said as soon as we trust Geno Smith, he's going to let down, and that's exactly what happened. Does he let us down again facing the Chargers?
I mean, probably my worry for Geno Smith is that Kenneth Walker just runs wild against this defense, and maybe he doesn't have to throw a lot. So I think Geno's fine in like a 2 QB Superflex league, but he's just not a guy I want to play in a 1 QB league.
Yeah, I think he's down to kind of that high-end streamer status. I agree. This Charger defense is definitely worse against the run than the pass, and Geno is not going to do more than he has to. So, I mean, maybe it turns into a shootout, but yeah, Geno is not necessarily a high-end starter this week. What about Will Dissly at tight end? Sad that we're not even talking about Noah Fant because he hasn't done enough to warrant it, but what about Dissly?
Touchdown or bust. So, I mean, if you're desperate, he can always score, but that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, desperation streamer, but don't expect more. And then Gerald Everett has been fairly consistent. What do you think he does in this game?
This comes down to Keenan Allen for me. If Keenan Allen plays, then I don't really feel good about Gerald Everett. But if Keenan Allen is out again, then you can stream Gerald Everett.
Yeah, I mean, Everett is a guy who is always going to be playable, streamable, not an every week must start. I had to say, like, I would just keep Everett the rest of the season. But look, it's the Seahawks. I think he's definitely a solid tight end starter this week. All right, Chiefs going against the 49ers. No need to talk about the quarterback or tight end in Kansas City. But what about Jimmy G going against the Chiefs?
Yeah, don't like Jimmy G this week. I mean, I think they will have to throw it a lot, but that's usually not good for Jimmy G because that leads to turnovers. So I'm going to sit Jimmy G.
Yeah, I felt okay about him last week because it was Atlanta. I don't feel good enough. I don't trust him in a big game, so I'm sitting Jimmy G. George Kittle, has he shown enough that we can trust him?
Yeah, I think you got to feel good about him. Again, a game where I think the 49ers are going to have to throw more than they want. That's good for Kittle. Start George Kittle.
Yep, the last 2 weeks, just when everyone started complaining, all Kittle does is block. He's been a lot more involved. I think you have to start George Kittle. When the Steelers take on the Dolphins, looks like we'll have 2 different starting quarterbacks than last week. So probably Mitch Trubisky is going to be under center because Kenny Pickett is in the concussion protocol. I mean, we'll see what happens. But if it's Mitch Trubisky, are you starting Mitch Trubisky?
I can't do it. It's not a terrible matchup, but man, this offense just doesn't excite me at all, especially for the passing game. So I'm not starting Mitch Trubisky.
There's no reason to start Mitch Trubisky, even in a super flex. I mean, you could probably find somebody with more upside. So I wouldn't unless you really have nobody better. And then speaking of concussions, Pat Freiermuth missed last week. Again, it's too early for us to say what his status will be. But if he plays, is he back in your lineup?
Yeah, I think if he plays, you got to start him. We saw it before with Mitch Trubisky. He was getting a ton of targets. So if he plays, you start him.
Yeah, this is definitely a good matchup for him. So if he's in there, Trubisky will probably target him a lot. Would like the Fryer goat if he starts. And then Tua is back finally. I think this is a good matchup. You know how I feel about it. I'll just go ahead and say I'm starting Tua if I have him. What about you?
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys with like Matt Ryan, Derek Carr, a good streaming option this week, even in 1 QB league. So start Tua.
And then now I guess we have to talk about Mike Gesicki again. Had his best game of the season, 2 touchdowns. Is Mike Gesicki startable against the Steelers?
No, I'm not falling for this. No, it's still Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill getting all the targets. No, not starting them.
And neither am I. I mean, look, that was with Teddy Bridgewater at quarterback, and that was them passing the ball a ton because they, surprise, lost again. I don't think that Gesicki will do much, so I'm not starting him. And the week ends with the Bears at the Patriots. Justin Fields, still a starter in Chicago. Justin Fields still doesn't have a place in your fantasy lineup.
Definitely not. Not against the Patriots. Not starting him.
Cole Kmet, I mean, at least he's done something the last couple of weeks. Does he do anything against New England?
I mean, maybe a catch or 2, but not enough to be in my lineup. I'm sitting him.
Yeah, you cannot trust a guy like Kmet. There's many other tight ends we already talked about that have much more upside. Now for the Patriots, things are getting interesting. What if Bailey Zappi continues to start? Not sure if Mac Jones is even healthy enough. But look, he's won his first 2 starts. Actually put up some numbers last week and then gets to the Bears. If Zappi is the guy, Is he somebody you put in your lineup?
Man, I can't do it. I know it's the Bears. I know it's a good matchup, but I just feel like this is going to be another game where they just run wild. They just run the ball. I'm going to sit them.
Yeah, this is almost a trap play, I feel like. Look, the Bears' defense hasn't been as bad as you think, and especially against the passing game. And in the second half, they really don't give up a lot of points. And this is probably just going to be a low-scoring game. So, look, in a Superflex league, if you have a guy like Josh Allen or Kirk Cousins or whatever on the bench because of the bye, you could stream him, but don't get sucked into thinking that Zappe is a solid streamer this week. Now, if Mac Jones comes back and he's the starter again, do you trust him because it's the Bears?
No, same. I mean, they'll just run. He's probably not 100%, not starting whoever the Patriots quarterback is.
I agree. Mac Jones, I was never in love with him to begin with. I'm not going to love him just because it's the Bears. I'm sitting Mac Jones. Hunter Henry, I mean, maybe he'll score a touchdown, but do you have any interest?
That's it. He's just another one of these guys that's touchdown or bust kind of. So, in deeper leagues, he can stream them hoping for that touchdown.
Yeah, I really could do better. I'm not going to start Hunter Henry. No thanks. All right, now they have the lowdown on quarterbacks and tight ends for Week 7. What about the all-important running back and wide receiver positions? We got you covered. Check out our Week 7 playlist where we break down everything you need to help you win in fantasy football.